Hello and welcome to another episode of Earth911's Sustainability in Your Ear. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe, and we're back with another interview talking about the future, this time of responsible fashion. You know, fashion is one of the most environmentally harmful industries on the planet because it focuses on delivering fast, short-lived products made to be worn a few times and discarded. And although there is a reuse movement making more options available to keep a used shirt or blouse in circulation, the problem with fast fashion is that it's built on a petroleum-based textiles industry that has only intensified our use of oil-based products. So what shoppers need, and what our guest today is working to get fashion leaders involved with, is transparency about the environmental and human impact of clothing. Shannon Lohr is the founder of Factory 45. It's a consultancy that has worked with more than 500 sustainable fashion entrepreneurs to develop a responsible industry in textiles and clothing. Her blog, podcast, and free and fee-based tools for fashion startups are a great resource to understand the environmental impact of traditional fashion and the potential for a low or no carbon future for fashion. You can learn more about Shannon and Factory 45 at Factory 45. That's factory, the word, then the numeral 4 and 5.co. Factory45.co. Welcome to the show, Shannon. How are you today?
Mitch, thanks so much for having me and for that introduction. I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Doing well. It's another fabulous morning in the Pacific Northwest.
Oh, good.
Now, your fashion industry journey started when you decided to introduce your own fashion product, the Versalette, which was a recycled fabric shawl and wrap that could be worn 15 different ways. So you gave people a lot of opportunity to reuse that initial purchase. What did you learn about fashion that set you on your current path of evangelizing a transparent and sustainable fashion supply chain?
Well, it's funny. I started in the industry, obviously, as a consumer of fast fashion. So I was so guilty. I remember back in college going to Forever 21, H&M, the fast fashion brands, buying a dress to wear on a Friday night, wearing it once, and then discarding it, throwing it to the back of my closet, never wearing it again. And I didn't think anything of it, as most consumers don't, because those garments are, $5, $10 to purchase and really don't break the bank for the most part. And so as I started to research what it would take to create a garment, a sewn good, I dove into the world of fashion and realized, wow, the fashion industry, as you said in the intro, is one of the most damaging industries to the environment, to the planet. And, I had this sort of like millennial outlook of like, if I'm going to do business, I'm going to do it in a way that's better for people and planet, even though I didn't know what that meant at the time. But obviously that set me up on a path of learning about waste, dye runoff, human rights exploitation, all of the things that are wrapped into the traditional fashion industry and specifically fast fashion.
So we're really, as you've already pointed out, really early in this transition from a wasteful fashion industry to one that can be sustainable. Is there a shared definition of what sustainability means starting to emerge, and where do you see it?
I don't know that there is a shared definition. I think that when you talk about fashion, and this is what I say to the entrepreneurs I work with in Factory 45, there's no such thing as perfectly sustainable. Anytime you're making something new, it's going to have an impact. So when it comes to creating fashion products, our goal is to reduce that impact as much as we can, whether that means using lower impact fabrics or designing and creating garments that are durable, made to last, trendless, seasonless. There is such a range of where you can implement sustainability into your supply chain. And the key is to not sacrifice the product. You can't sacrifice the fit, the design, the functionality, the draping, because then you just have a product that's going to sit in the shop, in the customer's closet and not be worn. And that's not sustainable for anyone either.
Well, and that's an important point. If it has to be the right price, it has to be the right fashion, and then people start thinking about sustainability. Now, you offer a set of training programs for fashion entrepreneurs and things like free checklists about how to set up a manufacturing relationship or vet a potential supplier. Based on that experience, what do you think the biggest hurdles facing a company that wants to sell sustainable clothing face?
Well, I think it's exactly what you said. It's that, sustainability comes after the fact. It can't be used as a primary marketing tactic. And so you're essentially you're implementing sustainability into your business model just kind of because it's the right thing to do. And then you have the hurdle of communicating that to your customer and getting them over the hump of why it's more expensive, why it's important, why they should care. And so there's just it's just a learning curve and a messaging challenge, I think, for the smaller brands to get their customers to a place where we're used to Amazon Prime. We're used to fast fashion, this instant gratification. We'll get it tomorrow, and so that it's the education of the consumer that I think is the biggest hurdle and biggest challenge from the beginning.
And pretty soon we're going to be able to get it in hours, and then things only get worse. So
yes.
Now, the storytelling problem is really the big one. And I look at Patagonia as an example of a company that has set the standard so far in terms of sharing information. So if you buy something from them, each item of clothing in the catalog comes with information about where it was made, who made it, how it was shipped, the environmental impact. Do you envision that being where all clothing shopping goes as we go forward? And once you can do that, how do you then, as a consumer, start to make distinctions?
Oh, wouldn't that be nice? I think it might be idealistic to think that that's going to happen for every company across all industry or across the entire fashion industry. But I have already seen it happening, not just with Patagonia, but with the smaller brands, the independent brands, the brands that I work with. Transparency is everything for them. And they're taking their customer through the behind the scenes photos, videos, talking about their factory, doing factory tours on Instagram Live, really immersing the customer in the supply chain so that you're really like, it's this balancing act of marketing and being really clear with your messaging, but then also creating a customer journey, right? Yeah. And getting your customer involved in the process. And so I think that's where these smaller independent brands have the upper hand because they are able to do that. They're more nimble. They're more connected to their customer than even, let's say, the Patagonias are. But I think Patagonia has set a nice standard and precedent for that. Hopefully more of the bigger brands take that on as well.
Now, so let's talk about some of the labels that are out right now, like Oikotex and the FSC, the Sustainable Forestry Council. Mm-hmm. If you were going to choose a new T-shirt for a holiday present, what labels would you be looking for now if you were going to just try to make a quick assessment of its sustainability?
Oh, that's tough to say. I think right now I'm very much about the natural fibers. I think when we talk about recycled poly and like that being a sustainable fabric, the microplastics issue and just like there is a lack of recycled PET in the supply chain right now. So I think I'm focused more on like, is it organic cotton or is it 100% cotton that has been recycled? There's a brand called Evernew that is just technological advancements in recycled t-shirts. Like they're taking actual fabric garments and turning it into recycled fabrics. So I think that's where I'm leaning more towards is the natural fibers.
Well, and natural fibers, of course, are a much better option than the recycled plastic because the plastics shed microplastics when you wash them.
Yes.
And so we keep hearing about, now we're using recycled rayon, which is made from plastic bottles, but that just contributes to the plastic problem anyway. So the natural fibers is a great place to start. Now, the other thing that happens is that stuff gets made in Asia for the most part with our fashion industry today, and then shipped to the US or to whatever part of the world that it's sold, adding an immense amount of CO2 emissions to the footprint of the product. Your initiative seems to suggest that we should relocalize and bring a lot of that creative and practical production work back home. Is that where we need to go in order to really be sustainable?
I think that's part of it. I think that localizing the supply chain, when I was starting out, when I launched my own brand and launched the Versalette, it was this like novelty that we had a supply chain within a 50-mile radius. All of our fabric, all of our manufacturing, the packaging, it all happened within a 50-mile radius in North Carolina. And that's like unheard of, right? So I think that this idea of bringing manufacturing back to the local community, of course, from an economic standpoint is important. But also just for my brands, you have to be there. You have to be in your factory. You have, the transparency conversation. You have to know what's going on. And so I think it's both. I think it's, yes, cut down on carbon emissions and shipping from overseas, but also make sure you're there in your factory, talking to your sewers. You know that things are above board, that there aren't human rights issues
Right.
being, all of that.
Well, and that's really the only way you can take accountability
Yes.
for what you're promising your customers. So absolutely, that's a great point. Now, has this global supply chain crisis that we're facing right now held back the evolution of sustainable fabrics, or do you see this as an opportunity to really change a broken system?
I think it's an opportunity to change a broken system. We see the H&Ms of the world that, they're going to do it by 2030 or 2050, and just these very, very long timelines. I'd love to see those shortened. But I think that the demand, especially having people, every year I have a few hundred people reaching out to suppliers asking for sustainable fabrics. The suppliers are hearing that over and over again. Mm-hmm. How much organic cotton do you have? Are you doing recycled cotton? Whatever it is. And so I think that demand as it grows as well is going to be important. And then, of course, consumer demand needs to happen with the bigger brands to get them to shorten those timelines.
Now, there's an interesting dynamic there because the bigger brands can also step up and order more, which gets them to the front of the line. As we emerge from the shipping crisis, what recommendation do you have for a small fashion brand that wants to get out in front and get access to that sustainably made fabric or clothing, finished clothing, ahead of the big guys who have all the money?
Yeah, I don't think that it necessarily has to be a race or a competition. I think that actually they can work hand in hand, because as the bigger brands demand it or ask for it or buy it, they'll make more. Like the suppliers can make more of it, especially, once we get over sort of these hurdles. Mm-hmm. And then the smaller brands, their quantities are so much lower, that you could piggyback onto a bigger order from a bigger brand. This is what we did when I was first starting my brand. We piggybacked on to a bigger fabric order. And that was one way for us to get access to fabric that would have higher minimums, higher MOQs. And it was a great kind of collaborative opportunity for everyone, for the bigger brand, for us, and for the supplier.
That's interesting. So really, there's an opportunity for everybody to work together to drive the adoption of sustainable fabrics. And each of them then compete the way that they want to with regard to how they position their clothing.
I think so. It obviously depends on the fiber and what the fabric is and, the supply of the, virgin fiber. But yes, I think that it can be done.
And then you come back to the storytelling problem. And now we're back to the beginning of the conversation. So let me ask, in one of your blog posts recently, you called out a bunch of innovative fabrics. What are three or four novel materials that our audience should be watching out for?
So one is I already sort of hinted at was Evernew. It's innovative new technology, recycles cotton garment waste, and it creates a premium renewable fiber. There is, what else do I want to tell you about? Oh, Recyclon, like that's a recycled nylon, but we've talked about some of the issues with that, but it's still a recycled fiber.
And it lowers the footprint.
Lowers the footprint. Yep, exactly. There's one that is a leather alternative made out of pineapple waste, which is pretty cool. And then there's one called Q Milk. It's 100% natural renewable fiber derived from sour milk, actually, like the protein in sour milk. So obviously it takes a while for these fibers to go to the mainstream market, but they're just kind of cool things to keep an eye on.
So here's a storytelling question. Spoiled milk?
I know. How do you market that?
Yeah, right. So how do you market the fact I made this from spoiled milk without the assumption that it smells like spoiled milk?
Yeah, well, I know. And there's fabric that's made from coffee. Is the caffeine going to soak into my skin? I think that, it's anything. If anything we've learned, anything can be marketed, right? Like if I were to have predicted Crocs would be the, $1 billion company that it is, I never could have predicted that. I think, anything can be marketed and messaged.
Well, if Starbucks is listening, I think we just ensured that we're going to have caffeine loaded clothing. So. Yeah. How can our listeners get started following your work?
I am at factory45.co. That's my main website. And then, of course, I have a blog, factory45.co/blog. I'm on YouTube. I'm on Instagram. And then I have a podcast, Start Your Sustainable Fashion Brand.
Well, Shannon, I want to thank you for taking some time to talk with us today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me, Mitch.
We've been talking with Shannon Lohr, who is the founder of Factory 45. You can find out more at factory45.co. Factory 45 is spelled out factory45.co. This is Earth911, Sustainability in Your Ear. And as always, we hope that you've learned a little something and you'll share it with your friends, your family, their pets, and their pets' friends. We want to get the word out here about sustainable shopping and thinking, because we consumers and each of us as employees or people running a company can make a huge difference if we think about the importance of nature first. So lead with nature when you're making your shopping decisions. Check out Shannon's blog and do keep tuned into Earth911. We're going to be back soon with another innovator interview. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe. Take care of yourself, take care of one another, and let's all take care of this beautiful planet of ours. Have a green day.